All right, we are recording. Well, listen, thank you for being able to tune in. This is probably our last update for the year. I think we've done a significant number of these to keep you all up to date about what's going on in and around the city, and kind of give you some statistics about where COVID is, what we're trying to do as a city to keep people safe. But just a few of the statistics, and these are only as of December 2nd, and some of these are Akron specific, and some of them relate to the county about how they break down. First, I want to congratulate and the public health department had two very large testing events this weekend, and over 2,300 people were tested just this weekend alone. And so, but as of last week, Akron had a total of 4,905 confirmed cases of COVID-19. And of that resulted in 512 hospitalizations. More importantly, and I probably should have started with this, we've had 60 deaths in the city of Akron due to COVID. And if I know some people like to compare it to the flu season, but for the 2017 or 18-19 flu season, there were 13 influenza deaths in Summit County. And I know it's not the greatest comparison, but it is a lot more deadlier than the flu. Novel viruses obviously have been around for a while, but all of the measures that we've tried to do to be able to protect people, I think have been fairly consistent about wearing a mask, doing the social distance and washing your hands and watching those gatherings. And anecdotally, I think we've been in this mode for about 9 months. And I've asked a lot of staff, even in the fire department today, because we've had a significant number of city employees that have tested, obviously have come back to work after they've gone through the quarantine. Obviously that has effect on their families. But anecdotally, the first part of the spread were probably at work, but definitely the lion's share has been the last 3 months, like the rest of the country, where you've seen a significant amount of spread in and around social gatherings and community gatherings. And I know people are getting weary of all the restrictions, but I know on a good news, we hear a lot of good news about a vaccine and its availability fairly quickly and being able to ramp up and making sure that people can get vaccinated. But we're still in the throes of this. And our hospitals, talking to Dr. Devaney and Dr. Hart and Grace this morning, who are the heads of our hospital systems, they're seeing a significant number of patients, and that is going up. And it's their capacity to be able to handle all of those, which that has been the goal, is to not overwhelm the hospital systems. And you've seen, I think in other cities, but in other hotspots, where they've had to take other extraordinary measures to be able to keep those hospitals open. There's a lot of other things going on out there medically that may happen, whether you fall and hurt your knee, you have a heart attack, or something you need medical attention. And obviously these COVID beds are taking up a significant amount of resources. I think the two big systems, Akron General, Cleveland Clinic, and SUMA, have both suspended elective surgeries for the time being. And they can speak to a little bit more of that. That's because they're seeing so many COVID patients. But even beyond the number of people getting sick, even beyond the number of people dying, we have had well over 250,000 in the country. There are complications. I think the medical experts just don't know yet, because the virus is fairly new, and people are experiencing some of these months after testing positive. And they're so much more severe than the flu. And these are not the same thing. We can't keep treating COVID as the flu or the cold. It's different. It's much deadlier. Like I said, I think there are some good news around a vaccine, but all that we can do to keep wearing that mask and to follow those guidelines from health professionals about stopping that spread could help that one person not get it. The average age for those who have tested positive in Akron is 41.2. The average age for those who have been hospitalized is 58.8, and the average age for those who passed away is 74.2. Recently, 6-7 months ago, the state set up a coded system where you would be classified as yellow, orange, red, or purple. And the county has moved to a purple level, and in all of our discussions with the governor's office and public health officials, what does that mean for the spread? It just means that it's significant in a community way. That's very difficult to find that one person who is spreading to everybody. It's not. It's obviously some people are asymptomatic and they don't know that they have it, which is the difficult part of this. I think, and this is my personal opinion, but we needed more of a national and state and local strategy to be able to address this, as opposed to maybe cities and counties doing kind of things on their own. and we could have made some different decisions early on, but that's neither here nor there. We're here now about where we are with COVID, and protecting people, especially those that are most vulnerable, is our top priority. And for businesses, if you can let your employees work from home, you should be doing that already. And these are all guidelines that are put out by the state. But when you go purple, obviously the county has put out an advisory about staying at home if you have to, and to limit your trips and to limit the times that you go out and limit your social gatherings. And you really have to start to think about what Christmas and what your holiday setting is going to look like, and the number of people. I know our Thanksgiving was extremely different. We weren't able to celebrate that until a couple of days after, for a lot of different reasons. I even announced that I had COVID. But we tried to be extra careful in allowing for a couple of extra days in that quarantine to go past, and wanted to keep our family safe. But usually it's a 20 or 25 people, and we weren't able to gather. And I know that has affected a lot of families. But now that we have another set of holidays coming up, I know there's a strong urge to be able to get together again. But I would argue that you should probably think about the number again and practice all of those social distance guidelines, and maybe even wear a mask inside if it's been around people that you haven't really necessarily been around, to be able to stop that spread and to protect the most vulnerable. Our private gathering ordinance is still in effect until December 16th. And quite frankly, we've been looking at some of the data about the number of infections and whether they can be traced exactly to that. Sometimes they can't. It's not perfect to be able to find out where it is. But we're definitely looking at whether there will be an extension or if it moves to some other type of policy initiative from the city. And quite frankly, there's a scale issue here too. I mean, when you have people move around, obviously they go from one city or one region to the next, and it's difficult to maybe control that on a certain level, to say, listen, we just can't have private gatherings in the city. So there's a lot of factors going into consideration about whether there's an extension or we come up with another policy initiative to be able to help stop the spread. Cities need to do it, more in conjunction with each other's, and I definitely think that, I know it was the right decision to do to be able to help stop that spread. But other communities need to step up and show leadership also, since we're in a region, to be able to do this, and that just didn't happen at this point. But like I said, I think we're looking at a lot of different options. We had roughly about 90 calls to the police department. And really, all of our COVID-related policies have always been about education first, and working with the health department, whether it's with businesses, so they can create safe spaces for their employees, whether it's with restaurants, and really restaurants, I think, have done an excellent job of creating safe spaces for people to come in and dine out. I mean, they feed us, and I think it's an extremely important part of our daily lives or our weekly lives, is to be able to frequent these restaurants to help them stay in business. And I know they've taken the lion's share of the hit because that's where people gather. But in the restaurants that I have gone to, they've made significant investments to keep their employees safe and to keep their patrons safe. And for that, I thank you, because I think it's still important, if you're able to do so, to try and do that. As they've come up with different guidelines, I definitely didn't think when they were talking about, and I don't know whether the governor does another shutdown or not in our weekly calls, or those twice weekly calls. Obviously, we've talked about different initiatives, and I think there's some different things coming in and around sports for now and for school. Will we continue to advocate at this particular time whether we need to look at a different schedule for school, whether we need to push things a little bit? And obviously, we have a continual discussion with the Akron Public Schools and all of the schools inside the city to be able to help keep people safe. So there'll probably be some different announcements maybe coming over the next few weeks. So really a huge thank to our officers and our Summit County public health employees for their work in helping educate our residents. And this is all about an education initiative. And I think I've used this forum to help educate people. And sometimes it's just that small decision of what you will do to maybe help keep people safe. And I think we've been hammering that home for the last 9 months. Obviously, I told you before that I had come down with COVID, had really, thankfully, it was a mild case. And as we worked through that, it felt more like a sinus infection to me. But quite frankly, other people are getting a lot more symptoms and a lot more sick. And followed, like I said, all of those work protocols, the Summit County health protocols, to be able to get back to work. So reiterating the basics, wash your hands often, wear a mask and keep your social distance and limit your public gatherings, limit your private gatherings in the number of people that you're around. That's really going to help stop the spread. Moving on to leaf and snow removal. Last week, we had our first decent sized snow. I wouldn't say it was big. I think there was around 4 or 5 inches, which is, sometimes just, a weekend for us, but it was also right in the middle of leaf removal. And a lot of the same people and a lot of the same equipment do those things. And so there was a pretty aggressive transition from leaf removal, knowing that the storm was coming. And I think our crews did a great job to keep our roadways open and prepped, and then responding to the snow as it came down. I know we took a lot of crests through 311, be able to clear some streets. And a lot of times this time during the year, I know we used a lot of salt and to keep those roads clear so it wouldn't stick. The ground temperature is still a little warm, so it wasn't sticking that bad. We did have some icy patches, but I think the crews did an excellent job of keeping those streets open. And then, listen, once the snow stopped and they get that cleared, they had to transition back to go and start picking up the rest of those leaves also. And it's like I said, a lot of times they're the same employees, and you can only work so many hours during the day. So it's not like we don't have enough equipment. We do. We don't have enough workers. We do, but keeping them safe in and around, all of these health guidelines too. So there still may be some leaves out there they need to get picked up, but I know they're working pretty diligently to be able to do that. So when you have to switch from leaf to snow, there's limits about how many hours that you can drive. And so we try to keep people safe in those vehicles. Just on a side note too, I am, I think, quite pleased with the community in just the mask wearing guidelines. I see people wearing them in their cars by themselves, which I think is important. It's a good model to set. So, and I know retail wise, you have to have one on there in most, if not all places across the state of Ohio. So I think that has gone well. Especially these last couple of months. There's a lot of people wearing masks. I don't think a whole lot of people are refusing to. I know that's another argument about the mandate part of it, but it does help stop that spread. Our leaf removal schedule just got put on hold a little bit. The crews are currently finishing up in Ward 1 over the next couple of days, and we're moving into Ward 9 on Thursday for several days to be able to pick up those leaves. Excuse me. Remember that before or after your scheduled leaf pickup, you can always call 311 or go online to akronohio.gov/311 and put in a request for bulk pickup for your leaves. And you can get 3 free bulk pickups a year. And I'll repeat that, you get 3 free bulk pickups a year. An important thing to note is your leaves have to be bagged to utilize this option. You just can't put a big bag or a big pile next to your trash cans and have them pick up. If you want them bulk picked up, you can put them in bags and they will pick them up. Like a lot of cities across the country, we recently announced, I know it was in the news yesterday, about a COPS hiring grant. And this is funded through the Justice Department, through the federal government. And like a lot of cities across the country, we've seen an uptick in gun violence and sadly in the number of people that have lost their lives this year, especially children. And addressing that gun violence and putting more officers onto that task force has been it's been a challenge through the year to be able to do this, but fortunately with this grant and hiring 12 more officers, we'll be able to put more people into that task force, be able to get those guns off the street. And it really is, it's those flow of illegal guns that come in and out. It's the number that are stolen, and it's the people that actually use them to settle an argument or if they're involved in criminal activity. The availability of guns to me, it's a side argument of whether we want to talk about, the legal right to own again, which is fine. I don't mind talking about that, but it really is a lot about illegal guns and getting those off the streets. And we've taken a significant number off this year, and sadly, they get replaced fairly quickly. And I know, as I talk to mayors across the country, it's one of the least restrictive, or it's one of the issues that we have the least amount of control over. And I think it's because of an argument that you can't have a solid, logical argument about the availability of guns and who has them, and not about the right to own one. It's not about that, but let's have a logical argument about the flow of guns and all those different issues about reducing violence. I think personally, being part of a couple of national initiatives and a statewide initiative around gun violence, hopefully these officers will be able to make a significant difference in our community. And it is all about keeping our community safe. in building upon, I think already, the public trust is out there, but how we're going to do this is 5 more officers will be joining what we like to call the neighborhood response teams. And these are a group of officers that work with Block Watch clubs and nonprofits and churches to address some of the concerns in the community. We want to add people to that. 5 more officers joining the gun violence reduction team, and more officers into our community relations department. I think building on public trust and some of the goodwill that is out there, I think is key for all of us as we have a discussion around policing and what that means. We'll never, I've said this before too, I'm not the defund police person. So don't anybody ever put words in my mouth about that. We'll always need the police officers. I'm more than willing to have a conversation about how we do that. And I think our racial equity and social justice task force is taking up those very conversations. And quite frankly, they'll probably make some people uncomfortable, but I don't think you can grow without being a little bit uncomfortable at how we address some of those concerns. And they're deep seated. They didn't happen yesterday. They didn't happen over the last 25 years. But I think we are in those positions. We are in the positions that we are now for a reason. And we need to be able to address those, I think, as quickly as possible. And I think bringing the community together to talk about a lot of those issues, I think is going to move this community forward. So I think, Bishop Johnson, who is leading these efforts, and all the task force members who are having those conversations about not only around public safety, but access to things and how we address systemic racism and how it's built into sometimes the fabric of the way we hire, the way we do housing, the way we do zoning. All of those are conversations that we need to have to be able to make those changes. And quite frankly, I think it's going to be some of the most important public service work that we all do. Being in public service, we work for the public. And I think sometimes that's not an attitude that's in enough of us to be able to create that atmosphere. I'm certainly willing to talk about a policy initiative and have people disagree with it. That's all part of it. But it's never personal. It's not about what I want. It's really about what's best for the community. And I think this is best for the community to be able to move this forward. And hopefully a lot of the institutions that we work with on a daily basis will follow our lead on some of these things. And some of them are already doing some great work on the diversity and equity and inclusion efforts. But I think we, with scale and with a lot more heft behind it, which I think includes the city of Akron and other institutions, I think we can make some significant changes. So I'm looking forward to those conversations and some of those policy initiatives that are going to come out of the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force. So next, we are also advocating at every level for our Congress members to put aside their partisan debate and talk about a stimulus package for not only for people on unemployment, for businesses, for hospitals that are going to need some help at some particular point, but also for states and cities in particular. We have no idea going into 2021 what this is going to look like. Obviously, we have our hopes, but we always prepare for what may be the worst scenario and talk about continuing, I think, those great city services that we do offer, continuing our partnership with the University of Akron and Stark State and the Akron Public Schools on those educational opportunities and those employment opportunities that we need to continue to generate, I think, for our residents, in our city. All of those things, I think, help push those conversations, but we can't have those conversations if the state wants to push, a change in tax law, or if the federal government doesn't want to help cities and states. And I'd say cities in particular, because I think they've borne the brunt of a lot of those things. And things usually flow downhill. And I think you know what that phrase, and I won't fill in the word about things flowing downhill. Cities are left to deal with a lot of the problems when they don't get addressed by other levels of government. And so all of the pandemic response, all of the COVID response, all of the economic response is usually left to cities. And it's not necessarily a complaint. I know it. I signed up for this. But we could use some help in being able to address some of those issues. And so hopefully, both the Senate and Congress will be able to put aside some of their differences and what they may work. I'm actually in favor of, meeting in the middle at some particular point in having a liability shield until they can kind of figure out with COVID and what it's going to be. And we continue to put that message, I think, out to both our congressional representatives, Senator Portman, Senator Brown, Representative Marsha Fudge, and Representative Tim Ryan about the way we feel. And we have a pretty good, I think, cohesive effort with the mayors across the state of Ohio to be able to get that message to them. They've heard it before. They're going to hear it again. And I think we're going to keep hammering on that door so they can get a package out to the people that need it the most. And these are people on unemployment. This could be a stimulus check. You need to get people help, because you can't have 12 million people or 8 million people rolling off unemployment the day after Christmas with nothing, with no job prospects. It's just not going to be good for this country. So put aside your arguments about what may be best and get something done for the people that you were elected to serve, regardless of whether they be Democrats or Republicans or any other political party. We're elected to serve everybody and to listen to those voices. So that's my political speech. I know I don't get too partisan on this part of it, but I think we need to be able to keep helping people. We have moved a significant amount of money into rent and utility and mortgage assistance. It could always be more, and we'll always look for more ways to be able to help people stay in their homes, make their utility payments, and get food on their table, and hopefully find a job. And quite frankly, the state has helped with CARES Act dollars on those first allocations, but those are only going to go so far. Small businesses have been absolutely hammered without the lack of people. Let's keep them afloat until we can get this vaccine in wide distribution, so we can get our economy and people back to work again in a safe way. And quite frankly, I think it's one of the measures that federal government should do. It should backstop these things in the times of national emergencies, which I think we are in a national emergencies, to be able to address this, getting through this, get the vaccine out in distribution. And I think things in the perception wise start to pick back up again. That's what our hopes are. And we think obviously the Congress can provide those monies to be able to help us do that. So that is it for the updates on that part of it. I'll let Steph ask some questions and we'll kind of go from there. Steph.
Okay, first question. Zach asked, why is there a measure passed by City Council and a stay-at-home order from the county, but the mayor's office encourages their followers to go downtown to Lock 3 and see the trees, lights, and shop windows?
Throughout this entire pandemic over the last 9 months, we've always tried to find a way for people to still be able to safely enjoy some of the things that we do. Obviously, we canceled a significant number of Lock 3 events because of the number of people. We canceled a lot of our fall programming because of the number of people gathering. We still feel that you can go downtown to Lock 3, social distance, wear a mask, and see the lights. We still feel that that's a safe thing to be able to do. Obviously, we consult with public health and say, listen, these are the guidelines that we want to put in place, and we get their sign off to be able to do that. And so I know it kind of seems like, not oxymoronic, but we're telling you to do one thing and offering you the other. We still think you can safely be able to do that. And I drove, you can actually drive by the lights if you actually want to, if you wanted to stay in your car. But if you do go down there, they're absolutely amazing and beautiful, the job that they did. So a lot of credit goes to the Lock 3 crew to create that environment. Like I said, I still think you'll safely be able to do that if you take a walk outside. Obviously, it's a little colder outside, but we think you can safely do that. As you social distance and kind of walk through it. It's not a 5-hour activity to be able to walk through Lock 3 and see these. It probably wouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes, and you are outside. And so that's why we're recommending to still be able to do that. So, but good question.
Next question, Larry asked, you've been advocating for mask wearing throughout the pandemic, but you yourself tested positive for COVID-19. Does this mean that masks don't work?
No, not at all. I mean, because I wore a mask doesn't mean that that's the way let me try to understand the question. Since I wore a mask and I still got it, I think that's a simple way for me to understand it. Yeah, I don't think the immunity part of it is if you're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. I think you try and do all the things you can to stop the spread. I have no idea where I necessarily may have picked it up either. And I can guarantee that I've been fairly, very careful in the number of public meetings, which are almost non-existent, the number of places that I go, which are, almost non-existent just because of the number of options. Golf season is obviously over. So no, there's still a level of risk when you step outside your bubble. And I think it's something that we all sit down and talk about, but me wearing a mask and still getting it doesn't make not wearing a mask, I think any more smart. I think you still have to continue to wear a mask to be able to help stop that spread. But they're scientifically proven to stop it or at least slow it, and it probably prevented me from giving it to somebody else. So I'll continue to wear a mask, but it's not a plastic shield where it completely shields you from doing it. It's also about that person next to you too, by wearing a mask, so you hopefully don't be able to spread it to them too. So I've seen a lot of mask wearing in the community, period. And I think if you would have asked me 9 months ago that most people would be wearing a mask when they go out, I would have said, there's no way. I wish we were a little bit more compliant on some of the other things, but I am extremely proud of the number of people that wear masks. And I think they have a general conscience of not wanting to spread the virus. And to me, I want to thank you for following those guidelines and our recommendations. Yes, next one.
All right, last question is from Jamie, and he said, I just saw that Akron was going to put a system called Y-Fiber, similar to ShotSpotter, in last year, but put those plans on hold. Why was that put on hold, and would the city consider that as an option again?
We have looked at this. I know even predates me from becoming mayor, but they've looked at ShotSpotter and other technologies. They are a significant investment, which means they cost a lot of money. That doesn't mean they're not worth it. We're actually looking at a couple of different options. And we have to see, I think, stronger and more consistent data for such a large investment. We're just not through with the final decision part of it too. The feedback from other cities that have tested out this technology, quite frankly, is mixed. Some really like it and some don't think there's been provided much of a value. It's a huge investment at this particular point. But that doesn't mean that we're not trying to lay fiber all over the city so we can get those high-speed connections, which encourage better learning outcomes, I think better economic development outcomes, and all of those things. So having fiber in and around the city is still a goal. And what we do with that obviously is part of a long-term planning and investment about how we do that too. If you remember from a few years back, the city, like a lot of other cities, was hacked. And we're making significant investments into that hardware and into that, into those protective things now that we have a little bit more of a remote workforce as we safely do that. And so I want to address one other thing as I wrap up the 2020 last community update. Obviously, it's been on the news too. There are obviously protesters at my house for a couple of nights. And I listen, you have a right to be there out there on the sidewalk. I have an address at 166 South High Street. We have multiple forms of communication. And there are other parts of it, whether I got elected to serve the residents of the city of Akron, and I try to answer as many of those things, whether they be letters or emails, sometimes personally if I can. And like I said, you have that right to be out on the sidewalk and to say which your opposition to a policy initiative. Like I said, there are other ways to do that. But there are also some phrases said outside of those things too that aren't necessarily part of that too. So you really kind of lose your message when you start on some of those other things. Not that I care that you have a different policy or a different idea about how we do some of those things. I'll certainly respect that opinion. But when it delves into something else, you completely lose credibility on some of those things too. And I'll when it comes to protest, I mean, we've always protected that right because you have the right to say that until it crosses a line. And obviously sometimes it has crossed that line to be able to do that too. So just keep that in mind that obviously you have that right to be able to protest. But it's also about the policy of what we're trying to do. And it's never a political thing with me. Where some of the things are on that part of it too, but we got elected to serve. And that's my mandate, to serve those residents here that live in the city of Akron. So as we wrap this up, I want to encourage you to make smart decisions through the holiday season, not only for you, but for your community and for your loved ones. And I think as we wait on the vaccine to become more widely available, still the best things we can do to keep ourselves and each other safe are to wear masks. Keep your social distance and limit your gatherings as much as possible. See, everybody celebrating Hanukkah, which begins on Thursday. I want to wish a very happy Festival of Lights. Have a safe and happy holiday season, Akron. Stay safe. Like I said, with any follow-up questions, make sure you contact us, and we'll talk to you in 2021. Be good, Akron.